ever fantasize about how you would be the first person to jump into action if you saw somebody injured in the street? But then again, you've passed so many homeless people on this morning commute alone without dropping any coffee change in their hats. I always figured that I could be the savior who tells off a creepy dude bothering a shy, scared girl on a subway platform. But in reality, I'd probably be underneath my headphones, purposefully ignoring the world around me. Well, I did before I had Jonah. When Jonah became too big to fit on my hip anymore, my full attention became split between the various dangers of the world, like moving traffic, any kind of colorful trash on the ground big enough for little curious hands, and Jonah. We'd lived in the Plainview apartments going on 4 years. Yeah, they didn't even name it anything even slightly more romantic than how average it really was. I guess I can respect the honesty. Jonah's dad slipped out of the scene early after I gave him the first hint of diminishing responsibility, and he took that invitation to heart. So, Jonah and I found an ordinary existence deep in the valley above LA.
I saw them with a big Toy Story blanket like Ralphie has. Do you think that they have a little boy too?
Jonah squeaked absent-mindedly from his Lego station under the dining room table. I was clacking away at my laptop right above while movers made one of their last trips outside our front window to the now filling unit next door. Unless his mom is a Buzz Lightyear fan, maybe, buddy, I said with a glance at the glass panes. I'd seen a flash of long red hair pass a few times on their trek. A few times I thought about offering my arms for a faster move, but this data deadline wasn't going to meet itself. Do I get credit for thinking of offering to help? A long series of knocks to the rhythm of Hamilton's My Shot broke the white noise of our low-volume TV and the gnawing on my pen. Joan, can you let Caleb in? Jonah was already climbing from under the table to race to the door before my sentence was finished. He undid our double locks to the bright and heartening smile of our building buddy and first friend from when we moved in, Caleb, balancing a full laundry basket as he slipped my little boy $1.
Joan, my bro, thank you for saving me from the 99-degree fire season!
Caleb directed the latter part to me in an over-dramatic complaint. Unlike me, Caleb was the kind of person who was quick to welcome a new neighbor. No fear of embarrassing himself in front of new people or impeding on privacy. Just like when he boldly asked if he could pay us to use our washer and dryer every once in a while so he didn't have to trek it down to the laundromat all the time. We now are graced by his presence every week. But I honestly could never complain. I secretly lapped up the gossip, the small talk, and the company every time.
Working hard or just looking like you are?
Caleb teased as he passed my dining desk. I ignored him and asked instead, "How was cleaning up the dance floor last night?" He held up a sweat-stained tee as he loaded the washer.
Dirty!
We both released a short laugh before he said,
I'll spot you that $10 ticket if you want to once and for all come and see for yourself next weekend.
I'll probably be pulling overtime, I said the next more quietly, and I'd have to find a sitter.
What if I come too?
Jonah interjected, his eyes and curly hair floating above the edge of the table.
How old are you now, Jonah?
Caleb asked while pouring detergent in.
5?
My dude, I will be the first person to take you on your birthday in 13 years.
Caleb offered. Jonah, the polite kid he was, tried to reciprocate the smile, but it was short-lived as he sunk back beneath the table to his plastic block fortress. Did you see the new neighbors yet? I asked Caleb after finally putting my wet pen aside. Caleb's apartment flanked the new neighbors on the other side, 2 doors down.
Girl, I helped move her freezer in.
Caleb responded. Of course he did.
Do they have kids?
Jonah's question bounced off the underside of our IKEA fixture.
I did see some kid stuff, but not the actual kid yet. Maybe he or she is with dad. Or other mom. Or non-binary uncle aunt. Hey, it's the future, is it not?
Caleb started a reserved pop and lock I could totally see him doing at the club. What is she like? I pried further. Caleb's dancing petered out as he thought.
Kind of reserved but friendly. Quiet but welcoming to human interaction. Reminds me of somebody,
he said, resting his empty laundry basket on the edge of the table.
Okay, if not the club, are we still on for nachos and Netflix on Friday?
Yes!
Jonah and I said in tandem.
Man, if they only had Fuller House and queso at the club, you wouldn't hesitate.
Caleb said with a cocked eyebrow as he exited my front door with a flourish. It was mid-July when I started to get the first inkling that something weird was going on in the unit next door. Jonah was brushing his teeth on his bathroom step stool as Kids Bop Halloween hits leaked out of his room 3 months too early. My door was cracked as I tried to settle my brain with a cooling cup of tea I didn't really like. I was powering down my laptop on my imitation wood desk when I heard it. A distant blubbering, crying, as if muffled by layers of plaster and wood beams. I froze in the stillness of my dim room, trying to place the sound as it came and went, and turning my head so my ear could catch the source. My eyes landed on my rented white wall. Timidly, I moved closer to the spot in between my flea market art and discount floating shelves. It was a child, or no, a woman, sobbing and sniffing. It wasn't in the way that someone tries to conceal their sorrow. More like they had nothing left to hide. I listened for movie dialogue or a dramatic soundtrack to accompany, but it was hard to mistake the unadulterated, raw sequence of endless heaves and haws. No plot lines to interrupt it, and no artificial filtering of TV speakers. The whole time, my ears were fighting with the manufactured creepiness that bounced down the hallway, until I finally left my spot for the doorway.
Hey, Joan, can you turn that off for a minute?
I hollered down the hallway. Jonah took a few beats before he appeared in his own doorway, his wireless digital clock in hand.
It's still 7:48. I still have 22 minutes before you said I have to turn it off.
He presented with the cutest defensiveness. It's 12, honey, I corrected him before he furrowed his brow, recounting on his fingers as he stared at the LED glow. But in that instance, a dull thud sounded from the other side of the wall. Then, silence. Except for the Kids Bop Halloween. Out of instinct, I closed my door and turned off the overhead light, like turning down the radio to find the house address. Cautiously but swiftly, I crept back to the wall, quietly pressing my ear to the cold plaster. Nothing. Nothing but the buzz of a building filled with electricity, plumbing, and people. The occurrence barely crossed my mind over the next few weeks. Once or twice, I may have caught myself absentmindedly staring at the blank space on my wall while I sipped my tea in bed or spaced out during computer work. But like with anything else, life moved me on to other mundane crises.
I just got it!
Jonah cried, tears running trails down his little cheeks as he toddled behind me carrying the lighter groceries of the bunch. The day was dimming into evening as the sunless air cooled our suntanned shoulders and sandaled feet. I usually hated staying out after dark, even in our extremely suburban part of town. There's really no part of ungated California that homelessness doesn't touch. But, surprisingly, I didn't notice as many vagrants and beggars in the usual vacant retail doorways or on the high-traffic corners. Maybe Newsom's homeless Cali cleanup was actually taking effect. If we don't find it in the car or in the house by tomorrow, I'll try to find it online, dude. Don't worry, I tried to ensure.
But I saved up so many cereal box tabs. I don't want to buy it. I wanted to earn it.
I was shifting the majority of the bags around in my arms in a one-handed attempt to position my keys as we reached our door.
Well, you and I both know you got the Goosebumps pen fair and square because you did accomplish getting all those box tops, so let's just pretend the one I'm going to find on eBay is still the first one.
By the time I was done serving the ethical theorem to my 5-year-old, I'd noticed that he'd quieted his crying. When I glanced to his face, I saw him looking up, but not at me. I turned my head to the tall target of his stare. It was a small child, peering between curtains of our newish neighbor's second-story window. I only caught him for a second and a half before he scurried back into the dark room, but it was enough time to gather some striking info. The boy was pale and cool-toned. I would have chalked it up to maybe his mom's fair, red-headed genes if it weren't accompanied by such a gaunt, tiny frame. It was hard to guess his age. He looked as small as Jonah, but with an air of either trauma or experience beyond what a child should have. I looked back to Jonah, face drying and distress replaced with wonder and uncertainty. iCarly's credits rolled in a living room filled with cold queso and tortilla crumbs that following Friday. Warm water ran over my hands as Jonah placed a stack of plates on the counter before singing his way up the stairs to get his PJs on.
Night, Jonah Barcelona!
Caleb yelled up after him before receiving.
Night, Caleb Bo-Baleb.
From the other end of our two-story tiny home.
Damn my parents for giving me a name that doesn't rhyme with anything. So, is it an Unsolved Mysteries or a Better Call Saul kind of night?
Before you turn anything on, I wanted to ask you, have you noticed anything weird at this house? I jabbed my thumb over my shoulder to the wall behind me. His grown-up Netflix time whiskey tumbler paused on its way to his mouth as he anticipated some mysterious gossip.
No, why? Like, what do you mean?
It's just, I saw her kid the other day, and he looked, I don't know, maybe malnourished or abused, but you don't go, like, calling CPS on someone just because their kid is kind of skinny, you know? But I also heard some weird noises, and my mind just goes everywhere, like, what if it's not her kid at all, and he's like an abduction victim or something?
So, definitely not Unsolved Mysteries. I am cutting you off.
Okay, maybe that's too far, I conceded. But you never really know who anyone is behind closed doors, do you? You know, they can be one way to your face, but have this secret life when they close their curtains.
Did she, like, say anything to you that made you think there was something going on?
Oh, no, she hasn't said anything, but Caleb cut me off before I could explain.
You have met her, right?
I opened my mouth before I was sure of how to explain that I hadn't, when Caleb drew my name out into two very definitive syllables.
Laura!
You know what, Caleb? People go their whole lives living in a building without ever meeting their neighbors. It's a scarier, weirder world out there these days. Like, in fact, you're the weird one being so friendly. Not everyone's as confident and extroverted as you and can just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Caleb. Want to be best friends? And can I do laundry at your house?
Caleb froze into a stoic and quiet resolve. He nodded once into his tumbler glass before he gently set it down and got up for the door. My heart dropped into my stomach like an elevator that snapped its cord, and when I tried to backtrack, my words tripped over each other like a cyclist that crashed in the middle of the Tour de France. Hey, Caleb, wait. I didn't mean that I have a problem. You're just like not... I just don't understand.
It's not that hard, Laura,
he said in the most reserved tone I'd ever heard him use.
What's the point of being a person if it's not to experience other people?
The question was rhetorical, but I believe he really wanted to know my answer. If not in the moment, then once I could come up with one. The fresh new air that crept into my living room was chilly as he opened and shut my door to the dark night outside. Late on Sunday afternoon, the kitchen was as hot as the August day outdoors, while store-bought cookie dough baked itself into shape in my oven. A dusty kitchen radio I hadn't turned on in months was singing into the rest of the house, and Jonah's nose and ears eventually ushered him downstairs to see what I was up to.
We never have cookies, except from the vending machine.
Jonah looked up at me for answers, noticing my brief attempt at makeup and hair.
These are for me, right?
He tried to confirm. They can be, I answered with a smile. If you come over with me to the neighbors to welcome them to the building, only a month after they moved in. Jonah's excited face didn't falter. He didn't judge my tardiness. And maybe on the way we'll drop off a plate of Caleb's. You can hand them to him, I added. By the time all the cookies were out and cold, a quick dinner was made and had, and Jonah had showered and dressed. Dusk was on its way. Leave it to me to take hours to execute the simplest of plans. It was only as Jonah was sitting on the floor, tying up his shoes, when a whirring police car passed our street. Or, at least I was waiting for it to pass. The anticipation of sirens and lights only ever building and fading off into the distance. But the sound was invasive for a bit too long. When Jonah finally finished and shot up to open the door, I think he expected them to pass too. But as we stepped forward to meet the outside, The introduction of the red and blue lights gave us pause. 1, then 2, and eventually 4 police cars jammed into our humble parking lot as they put a hand on Jonah's chest to keep him back. I looked up and down the walkway in front of our doors for any clue to the situation until my eyes landed on my new neighbor's archway. The door stood ajar to the world. Just beyond, a uniformed police officer stood with a distraught Caleb, cell phone in hand, as they exchanged conversation at his end of the building, seeming to be waiting on these reinforcements. Jonah and I stepped back into our doorway as officers crossed our path and into the next door unit. I leaned out into the air once more, cookie plate still in hand, as I watched the last of the officers enter. Caleb finally noticed me and caught my eye. His expression was a hard one to identify, because it was another one I'd never seen on him before. Maybe humility and disappointment, but also fear. But before my diagnosis was finished, something much more daunting caught my eye. In the same window, high above and to the side of our front door, was that little boy. But oh, was he different this time. Still at the small stature, his muscles and flesh now filled out what was once a skeletal and sickly figure. He looked healthy, but that wasn't the most poignant part of his appearance, because the part that froze every part of my body, including my breath, was the striking stain of dark red that trailed from his mouth to the front of his plain white shirt. But I think the thing that actually scared me the most was his gaze. He no longer was skittish and scared, rushing away from the window like a frightened animal. This time, he held my gaze, almost as if he was just daring me to look away. The only reason I did was because an officer, commanding yet polite, spoke up at my shoulder, startling me.
Ma'am, hi. I'm going to have to ask you to please get back into your house. We're going to cordon off the scene to all outside traffic, and at least for the next few hours, we're asking all tenants to stay inside until we clear the apartment.
When she broke my trance, she had done her due diligence to look up to the direction of my attention, but didn't react. I listened to her direction, glancing back up to see a now lit interior, officers filling the room, but no kid. I barely had the sense to ask for explanation before I blindly complied and went inside, slowly closing my door. The next day, I sat in Caleb's living room, my plate of cookies untouched in the center of his coffee table, as he explained.
I heard it, Lore. I heard screaming and crying. I kept listening to make sure it wasn't a movie or something, but then I heard banging, struggling on the other side of my wall. I called the cops for a noise complaint or a welfare check. They found bodies.
I had to have him clarify. Bodies? He nodded his head slowly. Apparently, when the first cop stopped in, our neighbor was trying to act calm, but was antsy. A bad actor, so to speak. She let him have a look at the house until we got to the upstairs. That's when she knocked him over the head with a small lamp, but she missed or didn't get him good enough because he overpowered her, restrained her to the back of his cop car, and called for backup. The first body they found was plain as day, laying in its own blood on the floor of the simple, almost barren upstairs bedroom that bordered Caleb's apartment. The others weren't found until a little later and a little more deep searching. The bedroom that bordered my house was almost empty as well, except for the beds. I know you can't see it, but I'm making quotation marks with my fingers. They were dressed with sheets, blankets, and pillows. But the moment you'd sit down on them, you'd notice pretty quickly something was up. Remember that freezer Caleb helped carry in? Yeah, freezer, not fridge. And it wasn't the only one. 4 large chest freezers adorned the upstairs, hidden in plain sight from any discerning glances, but inside were even worse secrets than I could have ever conspiracy theorized. Dozens of bodies were either contorted whole or chopped and separated to consolidate space. The pieces came together over time, both pieces of the story and pieces of the people. Some were identified, most were not. Those who had DNA in the system or family who could confirm them were known homeless in the area. "What about the kid?" I asked. Caleb looked up, confused for a second before he remembered and shook his head.
I don't know. They never mentioned the kid,"
he said. If I realistically could have scooped up Jonah and flown away into the night by sundown, I would have. But it took us another business week to pack our valuables and rent the U-Haul for Nevada. There's a lot of uncertainty in running away when you don't know exactly what you're running from, or if you even can. But we did. Caleb made his own voyage away from that place too, not long after me. We kept in touch for a while, but eventually the calls, texts, and our friendship faded into a distant acquaintance. Jonah and I found a new place in a much more spacious part of the country. A little cheaper and a lot more out of the way. Another fresh start. I know the moral of this unbelievable event is not necessarily to fear every neighbor you may have. But I do feel kind of validated in not wanting to meet new people anytime soon. Are you scared yet? That one was a little bit more gruesome than I'm truly used to. Should I have put a warning? What trigger warning should I have put down below for that story? When I write a scary story, I love marrying the very mundane and very natural and very real about our world with things that also can actually eat you. But tell me in the comments, I really want to know, was Jonah as cute as I thought he was, or was he annoying? I'd love to know. Mystery? Wow. That one's rare. It's a rare square, or a triangle, or a wedge. Mystery request live. What a question to ask. If you could see me do anything, what would it be? I don't even want to know. But totally appropriate for our spooky episode, we're going to have a little bit of a seance. I can't go anywhere else besides the comment section of last week's episode. I asked you guys what some of your best quarantine bands were. And if I remember, maybe I'll put together a little Spotify playlist of everything that you guys thought of. Though I'm probably going to be uploading this at 1 o'clock in the morning my time, so Airixis, I'm going to just start from the top. Airixis says, loved K-Flay. Rock on. Thanks for turning us on to new music. Love the apartment comments. So happy you got settled in a more normal place. Personally discovered The Who in quarantine. Let me just say, guys, you guys have way more of an eclectic taste than I even do. I feel embarrassed because of how average my music taste is compared to you guys. You're from all over the world, you are spanning genres, and you are introducing me to people that I have never heard of before. Kudos to you. Alejandro says, damn good artist. I've already followed your playlist. Thanks, dude. You're way ahead of everybody here. Is Chelsea Wolfe in your catalog at the beginning? She's truly top notch. Just discovered her. And I honestly saw a thumbnail on YouTube and I'm like, I'll click. You've baited me. I'll bite. Rhett Simone says, new isolation music for me includes Dirty Honey, Goodbye June, Oh No, and the Blue Stones Shaken Off the Rust, giving me specific tracks. Man, if you like some classic 80s hair metal, go and listen to Dirty Honey. Goodbye June is a little bit of a modernized version of some good classic heavy rock. Loved it. It's in my playlist now. The way that I do this when I ask you guys for new artists is I take every single one and add about 3 of their top songs to my general liked songs, and I'll listen to them over time. And some of them I absolutely am obsessed with, and some of them I'm like, I don't know. I'm just kidding.
but I'm not. Bethany Boots says, Bad Flower, Aurora, and the Midnight. I was already a fan of Bad Flower. I feel like they're like introduction into medium rock for like the teenage early 20s crowd that was like getting into rock a little bit late. A quality indulgent rock band. And I do have quite a lot of their tracks. Aurora and the Midnight, if you guys are into like that 80s renaissance, the stuff that they're doing now that's supposed to sound like what we thought 80s was supposed to be, amazing band and really good at that. Rafa92 says, nice playlist. I really like Sister by K-Flay and Kathleen by Catfish and the Bottlemen. Actually, I forgot about this, but Kathleen was the first song I heard from Catfish and the Bottlemen. I listened to it so much that I retired it early and it isn't on my playlist anymore. I recently discovered NIMBVS thanks to an Instagram ad. Okay, if I could pick a favorite, I mean, you guys all have amazing picks here, but I listened to a couple songs, and NIMBVS is, I don't like pronouncing that as if I know what accent. She's Israeli, but I don't know how they pronounce anything. So many good tracks. I'm obsessed. We're gonna finish off with Sayanta Das, and he says, two best things I discovered in isolation is ASMR and your channel. Thank you, Sayanta. I also found out about Bruno Mars. You know what? There is a first time to discover everybody. Bruno Mars, what a showman. What a talent. I'm glad to have all of these very eclectic bands in our world. You guys, have an amazing rest of your week. I'm going to go and finish this video that I am filming right now. And peace, love, rock, and roll. Oh no, it's just, this is my outro. That's what I'm supposed to say. This is my outro. Have a nice one, guys.